Donald J. Trump is now President of the United States. President Obama is the ex-president. And Mr. Trump, for the moment...
Picture it, the RuneScape hivemind frothing at the mouth because their digital pride float didn't get a fresh coat of virtue paint this year. The horror. A seasonal rainbow plushie delayed. And suddenly they're spinning conspiracies about American fascists hiding in their patch notes. They tell you they stand for love, for inclusion, for acceptance, until the second corporate pride hits a speed bump. Then it's pitchforks drawn, howling about oppression in a literal fantasy game. These are grown adults having a public panic attack because their pixel costumes didn't get recorded. RenderScape decided to go full meltdown mode over this. Pour a double and get comfortable because we're gonna break down the greatest hits.
Did he swear he was quitting?
They always say they're quitting. They never do, because their identity is tied to a game like a baby to a binky. This is what happens when a community turns politics into its personality. They cannot let go, not even for a single patch cycle. And that, my friends, is exactly why these virtue pageants get shelved when revenue finally matters. So let's cue the meltdown, pop your antidepressants, fire up your coping playlists, and let's roll the tape. Because this is what happens when you mistake rainbow pixels in a video game for your therapy session. Good morning, Gillinor, and welcome to AFK News, your source for the latest and greatest RuneScape news. I'm your host, AFKing, and joining me is Nora, my news-oriented RuneScape assistant.
Happy to be here. We've got a lot to cover today, so let's dive in, and without further ado, welcome to AFK News.
What's going on, AFK Army? Welcome back to AFK News. And before we dive in today, I really just quickly wanted to apologize for being a little too AFK these last few weeks and taking so long to get this video out. We had a death in the family, and if you guys could just do me a quick favor, like, comment, and subscribe if you're getting value out of these videos. It seriously helps out the channel. And let's see if we can make this video my most liked video on the channel in remembrance of my grandpa, and really get the channel and this video out there in the algorithm for more people to see.
Especially as we push toward our first major channel milestone, 1,000 subscribers to monetize the channel.
So RenderScape goes full CNN Jake Tapper level meltdown. RuneScape needs pride. Not once, needs. Like the entire game is going to spontaneously combust without a rainbow quest and plushie, apparently.
RuneScape needs pride. Old school needs pride. Yes, I am being deadly serious when I say that. No, I am not exaggerating for effect or hyperbolizing to make a point. Nor am I stretching the meaning of I want into we need. RuneScape needs pride because the world needs pride, and RuneScape is a part of this world. Look, I know how it sounds. I've been on the other side of this thought. Trust me, I am the most white-bread default settings guy you can find. I had the same train of thought that I imagine most people do when they first see Pride Month. What's the deal with all these rainbows? Like, I've got nothing against the gays, but is it really all necessary? But I am telling you, if you have a working sense of empathy and you take the time to think and to look at the world around you, you will realize that not only is Pride Month sorely needed, it is actually not enough. And we should be doing even more throughout the rest of the year to fix this messed up state of the world.
All right, let's break down this clown show one confession at a time. RenderScape opens with the claim that RuneScape needs pride, as if the player base is going to perish from a seasonal event shortage.
Quick, get a defibrillator. Gillinor is flatlining without a rainbow pride parade.
He frames it as the moral high ground. The world needs pride, therefore RuneScape needs pride. That's emotional blackmail dressed up as empathy. And let's call it what it is, manipulation, because if you don't agree, suddenly you're the monster with no heart, no empathy, no soul. That's how they box you in.
Yes, I am being deadly serious when I say that. No, I am not exaggerating for effect or hyperbolizing to make a point.
No hyperbole, he says, even though that's literally the definition of hyperbole.
Next up, global famine solved by a pride plushie. I can already see the ASPCA ad now.
He also tries the reformed bigot arc. You know the script. I used to roll my eyes at Pride, but then I grew up. Translation: if you don't buy in, you're immature. Another cheap rhetorical trick to gaslight disagreement. Like your only options are join the cult or stay a toddler. He lumps empathy, support, and pride under one mandatory umbrella, which is why the moment you even ask if it belongs in a video game, they brand you hateful.
You know the grift? Buy the plushie or you're literally Hitler.
This is why the RuneScape mind virus survives. By making disagreement feel like moral failure. The second you stop apologizing for having a different take, they melt down. And speaking of narratives that collapse the second you scratch the surface,
across the world, people of minority sexual orientation or gender expression are punished for merely existing. In my home of the UK, the Supreme Court changed the laws out from under us to remove any legal protections trans people may have had. Across the pond in the US, actor Jonathan Joss was shot and killed by his homophobic neighbor simply for being a gay man.
All right, hold up. This is where RenderScape goes full moral theater, pivoting straight from RuneScape Pride plushies to claiming a homophobic hate crime in Texas. Jonathan Joss, shot by a neighbor with no evidence nor police confirmation of it being a homophobic hate crime. Yet RenderScape holds it as the gospel truth, even though the UK sources are reporting the opposite of what he's saying. This is old school Twitter tier fact-checking gone nuclear. These clowns will grab any tragedy, any headline, no matter how half-baked, to prop up the corporate rainbow hustle. It's trauma bait, plain and simple, yet they call it empathy.
Empathy? Nah, he pivoted from plushies to a murder in 90 seconds. That's trauma mongering.
He's basically telling you if you don't buy the Pride merch or drink the rainbow Kool-Aid, you're siding with the murderers. That's not activism, that's emotional blackmail. So what are the facts in the Jonathan Joss case? I was going to editorialize this myself, but I think I found a few clips that really drive the point home.
And as proof of these extraordinary claims, the activists point to the following statement, which was posted on Facebook by somebody identifying as Jonathan Joss's husband. And here's the relevant part of it. And as you listen to this, imagine you're a detective arriving at the scene of this homicide, trying to figure out who's telling the truth. And then imagine that this is what an alleged witness tells you. So I'm going to read it now. Quote, "My husband, Jonathan Joss, and I were involved in a shooting while checking the mail at the site of our former home. The home was burned down after over 2 years of threats from people in the area who repeatedly told us that they would set it on fire. We reported these threats to law enforcement multiple times and nothing was done. Throughout that time, we were harassed regularly by individuals who made it clear that they did not accept our relationship. Much of the harassment was openly homophobic. When we returned to the site to check our mail, we discovered the skull of one of our dogs and its harness placed in clear view. This caused both of us severe emotional distress. We began yelling and crying in response to the pain of what we saw. While we were doing this, a man approached us. He started yelling violent homophobic slurs at us. He then raised a gun from his lap and fired. Jonathan and I had no weapons. We were not threatening anyone. We were grieving. We were standing by side. When the man fired, Jonathan pushed me out of the way. He saved my life. Jonathan is my husband. He was murdered by someone who could not stand the sight of two men loving each other." Close quote. That's the story. Now, having read that out loud, even if you know nothing about this case at all, you can immediately see the problem. And it's a pretty big one. None of it makes any sense. It's incoherent. It's the kind of thing that somebody would write if they've lost their mind. If you live in reality, you know that gay men living in San Antonio are not going to be stalked for years by roving gangs of homophobes who taunt them with the skulls of their dead pets and then light their home on fire and then shoot them. Okay, it's not the kind of thing that happens outside of the fevered imaginations of very delusional activists. It reads like a screenplay that was written by a demi-queer NYU student who's, also happens to be high on meth or something. At no point should anyone have even pretended to take this statement seriously for any reason. It discredits itself. It makes no sense. So we know that the man was killed, but there is no reason why we would take that statement at face value to explain how exactly he was killed and why. But a lot of people did present this statement, as incoherent as it clearly is, as a serious, believable account by a first-hand witness. Not just believable, but according to LGBT activists, it's absolutely unassailable. It's bulletproof evidence that this is exactly what happened. And the media treated it that way too. In the UK, The Independent ran this headline, quote, "King of the Hill actor Jonathan Joss was killed in a homophobic hate crime after years of threats, husband says." So they're leading with the statement from this alleged husband without pushing back in any way. Here's a report from a local news station just a few months ago, shortly after the house fire. Quote, "Joss said he left the house to go eat earlier on Thursday and thought he had turned everything off. He said he had been using a propane heater in the home for warmth. Mistakes happen, man, and it's my fault for, I guess, leaving something on," Joss said. "Or if somebody came in and did something, who knows?" Close quote. Well, that's a helpful bit of context that was strangely missing from the post that Joss's alleged quote-unquote husband wrote on Facebook. She suggests that homophobes burned the house down, but she leaves out the fact that Joss admitted that he'd been using a propane heater for warmth and also admitted that he had probably made a mistake because he might have left it on. And she also leaves out the fact that the local utility company had cut the power to the house and that it was slated for demolition. More on that later. In any event, essentially, he's acknowledging that, yes, he burned his own house down, and that's not all the information that Joss's alleged husband left out. Watch.
This house was built by my dad in 1957 for my mom.
This was no role, but real-life heartbreak for actor Jonathan Joss when his family home on Dorsey Street burned down in January. On Sunday, neighbors say he was back on the now empty lot, checking on the Southside property when he got into a deadly confrontation. In the neighborhood, people say Joss made his presence known, and not always in a good way.
We would see him down the street, yelling, ranting and raving, sometimes walking up and down the street.
Neighbors say Joss took the whole private property concept very seriously. Even after his house had burned down, they say he fiercely protected not only what was behind this fence, but well beyond it.
And just different things. He'll argue with different people.
Maybe somebody would drive by his home. He didn't like people driving in front of his home.
One neighbor says she saw similar behavior from Joss Sunday, although it's still unclear exactly how that led to him being shot.
So according to the neighbors, Joss would scream at passing cars. He would regularly harass innocent people in the community. He would act, in other words, a lot like an unstable drug addict with mental health issues, right? That's how he would act. And that's just the beginning. Here's a report from the local station WFAA, which has more details from the day that Joss died. Quote, "Neighbors said that Joss was at the site Sunday night checking his mail, which he did regularly, when something went terribly wrong. A video shared by a neighbor who was present shows a man, who they identified as Joss, pacing up and down the street with a pitchfork and screaming. The neighbors say that it was common behavior over the years for Joss to scream while carrying weapons. And even though they say they didn't like it, several neighbors said they were surprised when a man who lives just 50 yards away responded to the situation with a gun around 6 p.m. on Sunday," close quote. Now, before I read the rest of this paragraph, it's worth repeating this line. The neighbors say it was common behavior over the years for Joss to scream while carrying weapons. And on the night he was killed, Joss was pacing up and down with a pitchfork and screaming. Again, none of this made it into the husband's quote-unquote account of events. Instead, we're supposed to believe that Joss was just minding his own business, checking the mail, when somebody shot him for no reason other than the fact that he's gay, even though he's in a relationship with a woman. Now, if that sounds a little hard to believe, it gets even worse. Let's continue reading from the local news report. Quote, "Many neighbors said that Joss and Alvarez had a long history of trouble. They say both men had been showing weapons and trading threats for years. The feud took many forms. Weapons, everything, guns, shootings at all times of night," one neighbor said, adding the men didn't shoot at each other. No, just shooting rounds at their own property and stuff. You could just hear the multiple rounds just blowing off on both ends, and he would be yelling a lot, close quote. So there was just some casual gunfire on both sides of the dispute. It was a regular thing, apparently, and it was a conflict that Joss was obviously participating in actively. According to various news reports, police have been called to the Joss residence more than 60 times so far this year alone for a variety of reasons, from welfare checks to reports of shootings and fires. The callers reported that Joss had been carrying crossbows and pointing them at people, which led police to confiscate the weapon last summer. Also, it's emerged that neither Joss nor his alleged quote-unquote husband actually own the home that burned down. In fact, the property was slated for demolition before it mysteriously burned down. Quoting from Fox San Antonio, quote, city officials saying that the home Joss and his quote-unquote husband had lived in was slated for demolition well before the fire in January of 2025. According records from the city of San Antonio's dangerous assessment response team indicated that neither Joss nor his husband owned the property. According to city officials, after several reports of theft and mental health concerns, the DART team got involved. After inspecting the property, the building was brought before the Building Standards Board, which ordered it demolished. DART then gave the couple a notice to vacate. The homeowner consented to the demolition of the home, and services were disconnected from the property in October of 2024. Officials say the home then sat on a list of homes to be demolished before a fire on January 23rd destroyed most of the structure, killing at least one dog in the blaze, close quote. So the home was going to be demolished because of the state that it was in. And then after that, mysteriously, it burns down. Again, these are not facts that suggest that Joss and his quote-unquote husband were living the most stable life or that they were being tormented by random, mysterious homophobes. It looks a lot like they were very unstable people.
So every angle he's pushing here falls flat immediately if you're even remotely familiar with the subject matter.
Walsh laid it out. No evidence, no pattern, no hateful neighbor conspiracy, and yet RenderScape's over here spinning a King of the Hill fanfic where a mob of cross-burning homophobes are out to get him. The local reports don't back it up, the UK reports don't back it up, the neighbors don't back it up. Hell, even Joss himself admitted the fire at his house was his fault.
Plot twist. The LGBTQ community doesn't get a pass on lying. Facts still matter.
Then he continues on whatever this rant is supposed to accomplish.
Bigotry is not a solved problem. It is here, now, all around us, and we are in a constant battle to make sure it does not become mainstream again. Pride Month is one of the tools we have to combat it. It is not enough on its own, and we do need more, but it is a start. When the cisgender heterosexual folks like myself go out into the world and see the rainbow flags everywhere and the lovely gay couples holding hands out in the open, it sends a message that these people are a part of normal everyday life, that they are here to stay and we have to get used to it. The more often people are exposed to those different from themselves, the more they come to accept them. The truly hateful among us will do everything they can to shun and to hide away those that they hate because they know that given enough time in the spotlight, the average person can come to accept anyone. Hate is not natural. It takes energy and effort to maintain, and a huge part of the fight against hate is making people realize that it is a massive waste of time.
And here comes the next layer of this corporate sermon. The only path to a safe space is total forced normalization. If you see enough rainbows, enough pride events, enough lore changes, you'll eventually submit. You'll only get so tired of resisting, you'll surrender. That's the play.
Keep feeding you the rainbow pill until you choke on it.
Till they fucking choke on it. Yeah. Till they choke on it and they buy 100,000 shares. That's what I want you to do. You be ferocious. You be relentless. You be telephone fucking terrorists.
He calls it acceptance. Let's be real. It's coerced silence, a moral shakedown. Agree or be branded hateful. If you dare question it, you're the problem.
Shut up and comply, you
radicalized normie.
It's the same strategy you see in every ideological marketing scheme. Flood the messaging, crush the dissent, then claim victory when everyone's too exhausted to push back. That's not empathy. That's emotional carpet bombing.
Next quest. Mandatory pride-themed therapy session needed for Quest Cape.
Remember, tolerance is a two-way street, but they want it to be a one-way dictatorship. And if you keep calling it out, they melt down every single time.
Right.
So how does this all tie into RuneScape? Well, like it or not, RuneScape is a place that we inhabit. It is no longer just a game. It is a location we visit, and as such, bringing pride into Gielinor is going to have the same effect as it does when bringing it into the real world. There is no argument you can make to separate the virtual from the physical. Your brain processes them in the same way. When you get a rare drop and sell it for a bunch of GP, it's the same feeling you get when finding a free £10 note on the floor. It's the same chemicals in the brain, the same neural pathways, and that holds true for all ideas. Seeing a bunch of players running around in colourful jumpers and scarves and floral headwear has the same effect as if you saw it on the streets of your hometown. It is meant to show you how many people around you are part of a community that would normally be invisible to you, and that has power. The more places, real or virtual, that we can get to adopt pro-LGBTQ messaging and allow for their visibility, the better. It gives people in these minority groups more safe spaces they can exist in, while removing hiding spots for bigots to lurk.
But wait, there's more.
I hang out in a lot of LGBTQ type spaces, and there isn't a day that goes by where I don't hear about how someone in those spaces has been bullied, harassed, or disowned by their family just because of who they are. Putting pride in RuneScape is a way to give people in these situations where real life is not safe for them a chance to express themselves in a place that is. It can be a lifeline for people in that situation, as it becomes the only place they can really be themselves. So I don't want to hear anyone talking about how pride has no place in video games, because members of these communities deserve to be safe everywhere, and as long as places exist where they aren't, well, we still have work to do. And I'm not going to sit here quietly and watch as people try to take them away.
Here's the next pitch. RuneScape isn't just a game. No. It's your home, your sanctuary, your digital living room. And if your pixel house doesn't have a pride flag on the wall, well, I guess that means you're running a hate compound.
Safe spaces are cool, but this isn't therapy. It's a video game about stabbing dragons for loot.
Exactly. These people act like RuneScape is a substitute for real life. Like, if you don't see enough rainbow banners between your Slayer tasks, society will crumble. This is a medieval fantasy point-and-click MMO with a half-broken PVM system, not a pride parade float. But there it is. He's saying the quiet part out loud. Look, his monkey see, monkey do meme is his way of telling you the plan. Flood the game with pride messaging so you adapt. Force the exposure until you stop questioning it. That's not empathy. That's conditioning.
Next update. Tutorial Island comes with mandatory diversity training.
This is what they do every single time. They'll tell you it's about inclusion, but what they mean is agree, comply, adapt. And if you don't, you're
the radicalized normie.
RuneScape was always meant to be an escape, but they're trying to turn it into an ideological classroom.
RuneScape, now with mandatory pride-themed quests required for Quest Cape.
It's the same formula every single time. Overwhelm the messaging, shame the dissenters, claim the moral high ground, and the moment you push back, watch the meltdown begin. All right, so after all the plushie sales pitches, the moral sob stories, and the pixel safe space meltdown, RenderScape wants to lay down the final gospel. What they're up against. Spoiler alert, it's anyone who disagrees with them.
Which brings us on to... Let's take a trip into hell, formerly known as Twitter, and take a gander at the OSRS official account. They recently made a post announcing this year's Pride March, a fairly basic and innocuous gathering done on the JMod's own time, with no inclusion or mention of any new in-game seasonal events or cosmetic items. We'll get more into those later. They've literally done close to the smallest possible thing they could have done, and still, their comments on it are absolutely vile. People using gay as an insult in 2025, claiming they're going to quit the game over it, or just straight up uncensored slurs. This is just a small selection, and it took me all of 5 minutes to gather them all. This isn't me cherry-picking a couple of bad apples. This is a rampant problem. Even the slightest mention of the P word, and these cretins come out of the woodwork, foaming at the mouth to tell you how much they hate you. Think for a second, how broken does your brain have to be? How much hatred is a person holding in their heart if even being friendly towards the LGBTQ is enough to make them despise you? If Jagex backs down and reduces pride content to appeal to these arseholes, they're sending a horrible, cowardly message. They are saying that the feelings of these snowflakes who get triggered by rainbows is more important than the well-being of every person who isn't straight and cis. And yet they did back down, didn't they? We aren't getting a proper Pride event with a mini quest and new cosmetics this year. Something we did get for the last 3 years in a row. I was holding out hope it might come later in the month, but no, it was confirmed during the live stream that it's not happening. Last year, June 5th, they had the Pride event front and centre as part of its own blog post. This year, the Pride stuff is shoved to the bottom of a post about AFK timers. The difference in tone is clear. I'd love to be proved wrong on this, but I think we can safely say that we are not getting any new Pride stuff this year, and I think that's disgraceful. Especially so with all the work that was done by the mods, past and present, to bring this to the game in the first place. There is no good argument, even in a business sense, that you can make for this. The dev time required to make a few Pride-themed cosmetics and a short mini-quest cannot be that much. A couple of devs, of which you have dozens of apparently, could whack this out in a week, probably less. The Pride March, hosted from the JMods' bedrooms on their own unpaid time, was so popular that the servers couldn't render everyone on screen at the same time. Pride is clearly widely popular among your players, and you got rid of it anyway, so it clearly wasn't about staying in line with what the customers wanted. Hate towards Pride isn't even anything new, and you know what? It was decreasing. Past Pride events had way more hate than the 2024 one did. The anti-Pride losers were barely a fart in the wind that year. You just canned Project Xanaris, one of the most anticipated projects you'd ever come up with, which had no end of people working on it, and you're telling me that you can't spare a few people to make something that would mean the world to your players who have stuck with this game for over a decade. Why? Because you're afraid Joe Rogan might not like it, or someone like Grums?
He kicks off with the standard rainbow martyr complex, the idea that if Jagex tones down Pride content, they're empowering bigots. Let's call it what it is, a false binary. There's no room in this world for a reasonable middle. If you think seasonal Pride events don't belong in the game, you're basically a hate-crazed villain. That's the moral high ground they're trying to hold, and it's about as stable as anybody who uses the northern staircase in the Lumbridge Castle.
Empower the bigots, you say? They nerfed the rainbow plushie? They didn't legalize hate crimes.
He makes it sound like Pride was the only force stopping RuneScape from collapsing into a 1930s dystopia. It's theatrical, it's manipulative, and it makes disagreement impossible without branding you a monster. All right, let's keep following this meltdown because it somehow seemingly gets even better.
Great. Now we have to talk about Grums. Grums is a guy who used to work for Blizzard like 20 years ago, but now he carves out his earnings on Twitter, grifting to the alt-right by complaining about wokeness in video games, which is just any time a non-white person shows up on screen or when the women in a game aren't sexualized enough to give him a boner. He jumps from game to game whenever there's some made-up drama he can leech off like the parasite that he is, and he ended up talking shit about the pronoun update last year because of course he fucking did. It's not enough for him to just talk though. No, he has to put individual people on blast and open them up to harassment from his thousands of loser followers. He actively tries his best to make people's lives a living hell, just so he doesn't have to see pronouns in video games. But this didn't start with Grums, no, he just swoops in afterwards to steal the credit. This starts in our own player bases, and I now regretfully have to show you Pride Slayer. Pride Slayer released this garbage about 2 weeks ago. It's a rambling mess of loosely connected points that go nowhere. It complains about RuneScape 3 having too much microtransactions, and somehow tries to blame it on pronouns and virtue signaling, stuff that anyone with a working brain can tell you isn't related in the slightest. Meanwhile, he's desperately trying to make himself the victim while finding the time to call out and point to individual JMods that you should be mad at. I don't care if you put some half-assed "please don't harass them" statement at the start of your video. You know damn well what you're doing here. This is all a thinly veiled attempt to throw your grievances onto a crowd of people you already hate. Yes, I get that RS3 might not be going in the direction you like, but you don't get to try and ruin people's lives over it. It's a gross and disgusting video, and no sane person should be giving anything said in it any credit. It sucks. It's hate disguised as concern. Do not fall for it.
Next, RenderScape pivots to talking about Grums, who he claims is a Twitter drama grifter he blames for single-handedly destroying the entire Pride movement. As if one guy tweeting about the pronouns update somehow rewired all of Jagex's corporate structure overnight. The mental gymnastics here would seriously snap a lesser spine.
Yeah, Grums is definitely the reason 75% of the devs got pink slipped. I mean, come on. Seriously?
Or rather, Pride Slayer's Wokescape 3 video masterpiece, where he talks about the LGBTQ devs inserting their ideology into the game and rightfully claims MTX was feeding the cancer known as woke in RuneScape.
RenderScape failed the mission here too, and so did Cathar with his
lying, misinformation, and pandering.
They both claim Pride Slayer's video is about MTX and woke is some byproduct, but it's not. If you want to watch our breakdown of both of these videos, I'll make sure our editor-in-chief links it in the description for you.
He goes on to blame literally every critic of Pride events as far-right conspiracy theorists. This is the same rhetorical cheat code he's been spamming the entire video. You question Pride? You're a bigot. You question Pride? You're the alt-right. Zero nuance, zero self-awareness, it's all or nothing, and it is so exhausting. And if you think he's done moralizing, buckle up, because he's just getting started.
So how did Jagex respond to this? Did they stay strong in the face of adversity? Did they take action against the people responsible? The people harassing and harming their direct employees who make the game that keeps them alive? No, they cut down on Pride content and hoped we wouldn't notice. Oh, and fired a bunch of JMods for good measure. Oh, and it gets even worse. While writing this script, more info has come to light and the story just keeps getting more and more awful. As explained in this article from Pink News, any new Pride content was essentially banned from entering either games by order of a company-wide memo, despite the fact that it was basically done with no drop in output on other projects, and that the JMods who cared for it even offered to add the content to the game on their own time for free. It didn't matter. They were still told no, for absolutely no good reason.
Now he's trying to make this even more personal, acting like the dev team is literally under siege from players with pitchforks, and if Jagex doesn't reinstall the rainbow skin pack, these devs will physically get attacked. That's some of the worst fear-mongering I've ever seen, especially coming from a dude who calls himself a video game commentator. It's the same moral panic strategy. If you don't buy in, you're a danger. You're a threat. You deserve to be called out because you didn't clap hard enough for the corporate rainbow. That's all this is. A moral loyalty test. Okay, deep breath, because he goes even further off the rails right after this.
This is pretty damn far from okay. As I've already said, this sends a horrible message. It shows that you'll stop doing the right thing if enough bigots will get together and cry about it. It shows people that in your opinion your employees are fair game to be targets for hatred and direct attacks if they create updates that players don't personally like. What's next? Is someone going to come to Cambridge and cut off the office electricity because they don't like sailing? Because you're kind of telling them that it would work. Seriously, look at some of the things your anti-Pride crowd is saying. Is this really who you want to be pandering to? Is this your core audience that shares your company values? I sure would hope not. I'm sorry if this is sounding too dramatic, but I need to reiterate, these are real people's lives that are being ruined because the fan base of the game that they work on are getting away scot-free with constantly attacking them. This has got to stop.
He closes out with the ultimate emotional appeal, the idea that pride is so fundamentally tied to safety, to dignity, to humanity itself, that removing it is basically dooming an entire class of people to suffer. That is cult-like, straight up. This is the same high-pressure marketing you see from grifters, buy the plushie, or you are literally killing us.
Won't somebody think of the pixels?
It's manipulative to the point of nausea. There's no middle ground, no compromise, no honest debate. Just hysteria dressed up as empathy. And apparently, that's what they're up against. Facts, disagreement, anyone who dares treat a video game like a video game. And that's why they melt down. Because the second you stop apologizing for seeing through it, the hustle falls apart.
Where do we go from here? First, bring back Pride to RuneScape. Both game versions. Do not let the bigots win. They will never be satisfied until they've destroyed everything they despise, which is everything even slightly different from themselves. It is not something you can appease. Second, Jagex, do something, anything to stop the constant harassment your employees are receiving from the player base for updates they don't like. This extends beyond just Pride stuff. How much vitriol have we seen spewed directly at your employees for updates like Sailing and even Yammer recently? But it is most important to protect them when they are being targeted for their very identities. Don't act like there's nothing you can do. You have a myriad of options at your disposal. It's just up to you to actually use them. And to you, John. Can I call you John? I'm going to say what you are clearly too afraid to speak out loud. If this is all it took to make you remove Pride, then you already wanted it gone in the first place. No amount of saying that you're an ally will mean anything as long as your actions continue to embolden and to encourage players who want my friends dead. You claim you want to focus on what players want? Well, this is what players want. They want pride in their game. They want a safe space to be themselves in a world that won't let them be. They want rainbows and flags and pretty colours for everything. The numbers are here, on the table, the evidence is clear. The old school community is one of inclusivity and not one of fear or of hate. If you ignore the numbers, then you are just doing bad business.
Alright, so now RenderScape rolls out the grand finale. According to him, if Jagex doesn't push Pride every single year, they're basically bowing to a mob of hateful bigots. Cowardice, he calls it, as if he's protecting the studio from a meltdown is somehow a moral crime.
Right. Because the only reason not to rainbow wash every square inch of RuneScape is bigotry, obviously.
He frames it like a moral ultimatum. If you don't give him the pride parade he demands, you're oppressing queer players. As if the entire LGBTQ community is going to collapse without an annual pixel parade and a couple color-coded plushies. He even claims the devs would have worked unpaid to finish Pride content. Look, if you're volunteering for unpaid labor to shoehorn identity politics into a video game, you might need to get out more.
Like, log off and go touch grass. Maybe talk to a real person who's not in your online echo chamber.
And here comes the closer. He paints Jagex leadership as villains, throwing their own LGBTQ staff under the bus. Never mind the players who've been screaming for years, leave politics out of the patch notes. That doesn't matter, apparently.
See how this works? Players are a hateful mob, devs are a rainbow priesthood, and you, the average gamer, you're not even in the conversation.
It's the same moral shakedown we keep talking about. If you don't fund their plushies, you are basically a clan rally attendee. If you want seasonal content to stay about the game, you're a villain. There's no in between. That is the real pipeline here. And it's why they panic whenever someone calls it out, because once you see the manipulation, you can't unsee it.
Same meltdown, different day.
And we're here for every single second of it. Buckle up, because there's more coming. So this is the bottom line. We've already summed most of this up before, but a seasonal event got scaled back, and the entire hivemind went feral, like a toddler denied a Happy Meal toy, screeching at the cashier. They talk about empathy, but they weaponize tragedy. They talk about community, but they silence everyone who disagrees. They talk about pride, but what they really want is compliance.
And a plushie.
These corporate pride grifters keep moving the goalposts until you can't even tell where the pitch ends. And if you dare to point that out, they'll slap you with a scarlet letter. Hateful, bigoted, unwoke, every single time. But this time, it didn't work. Jagex isn't backing down. The dev layoffs happened, the rainbow event got sidelined, and the meltdown was glorious, because sometimes reality hits harder than any thread on X ever could. When the pixels dry, what's left is a community that still wants to play a game.
And not a mandatory group therapy session.
Not a TED Talk. Not an ideological soapbox. A game. Full stop. You want to stand for something. Stand for good gameplay. Stand for free speech. Stand for the idea that everyone deserves a seat at the table without forcing them to chant the company hymn to keep the peace.
Oh, I didn't hear you singing Kumbaya with the rest of us. Are you a radicalized normie?
If it makes us the villains, well, so be it. We'll be here breaking down every meltdown, every moral panic, and every corporate flop that tries to bury the truth under rainbow confetti. This is AFK News. Thank you guys for watching. Thanks for supporting the channel, and if you want more unfiltered takes just like this, you know what to do. Like the video, subscribe to the channel if you guys are new, and let's keep this conversation going down in the comment section.
Stay tuned. They're gonna rage again any minute now.
Until next time, Scapers, may your XP lamps burn bright,
And your RNG always be in your favor.
and I'll catch you in the world of Gillinor.